morning and welcome to today's panel on research, innovation, and development. Whether you are based in the university, on the industries, or you're a policy maker, you're a politician, you establish your own company, there's no escape from this topic. And as Africans, we cannot transform our continent without what we call RID, Research, Innovation, and Development. Historically, we contributed to this in our pre-colonial formations. Many of them are not new to us. They've shaped our societies because we need to produce knowledge. You can't have a society without problems. We have to solve problems. We can't solve some problems without creating technologies, even if it is as basic as the hoes and the cutlasses that we use to farm. We cannot create economic growth without it. We cannot improve our system of governance without it. We cannot improve our health, our education, and culture without R&D. That's one element in which the relevance requires no debate, neither does it require any conversation. But there must be debates, and some of these will come out in this conversation. How do we decolonize knowledge? How do we avoid exploitation? How do we avoid domination? Is it possible that we can bring back some of our indigenous knowledge systems and incorporate them into contemporary RID? And to you and those of us who are based in the universities, what is the future of our universities? We cannot answer the question of the future of our universities without this topic. I will join because I've been drafted as one of our panelists is unable to join us for a small health reason. The anchor of this program, the moderator, this is the second time he's doing this. I'm very, very grateful to him. He's the one who put this team together as he did the very first time when he set up a panel for us. And as I've told other members of this panel, I look forward to their setting up future panels that will explore our topics. We may be disappointed with our governments at home, with the politicians. And the way I look at it is, if some people are destroying the continent, you and I have to elevate the continent. Professor Adesida, thank you so much. You don't need an introduction, so I'll be brief. He's a distinguished scientist and engineer, an experienced academic administrator. He served recently as university provost and acting president at Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan, the leading institution in Central Asia. So good was he and so successful was he that his efforts propelled that institution into the top 25% research-intensive universities in the 2025 Times Higher Education's World University Ranking. Before then, he was the Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and the Dean of the College of Engineering at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. That was actually when I knew him. And he has served as the president of the IEE Electron Device Society. He's a fellow of many professional societies, member of the US National Academy for Engineering, and at the moment, His research focuses on higher education leadership, STEM education, research and innovation, entrepreneurship, and their relevance to the development of nations. I will hand over this conversation to him. At a point, he will call me to make an intervention regarding this topic in relation to the humanities. Professor Adesida will introduce other members of the panel. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you, Professor Falola, and I'm very happy to be back on the platform. Can somebody take the introduction of the, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Again, good morning and good evening to everybody joining us. I understand this proceeding will be on different platforms, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and on what we are doing right now. Again, my name is Ilesanmi Adesida, and I'm glad to be joined by colleagues. I'll start by mentioning Dean Lola Eniola-Adefeso, the Dean of Engineering at the University of Illinois, Chicago. University of Illinois has a couple of branches. I used to be at the UIUC in the village in Urbana-Champaign. She's in the big city in Chicago. Okay, that's the University of Illinois. And a colleague that I've known for a long time, Professor Ibitaya Akinwande, who has been a professor at the MIT for the longest time, and previously was at industry in Honeywell in Minnesota. And another colleague, Professor Chimay Anumba, who is the Dean of Design, Construction, and Planning at the University of Florida in the great state of Florida. I don't know whether it's Tallahassee or I'm not sure which city now. Yeah, I'm not sure which. Yeah. Unfortunately, Professor Zeleza, Paul Zeleza couldn't join today because he fell sick, and he called me since yesterday actually that he wouldn't be able to join. He's a well-known academic scholar in the humanities and social sciences, and of late he has been very much involved in AI and humanities, but he cannot join us. But as Professor Falola mentioned, we drafted him, so he'll be able to contribute in terms of research with respect to humanities, because that's going to play a bigger role in the future, given that everything we are committing our lives, from what I understand, at least for now, about AI, humanities and AI are going to be very important in the future. Well, I'll start by saying that research, the term research is used ordinarily every day. I mean, you can easily go on the internet and do some research. If somebody says, I should go and take some medicine, I go find out what's going on with the medicine. Anybody that has access, you can ask people. That's research, a process of research in terms of individual basis. But in terms of institutional research and research that contributes to national development or really advancing knowledge, I think one thing what they define research as just trying to know about our environment, knowing about the natural environment. I think that all this came out of philosophy, trying to know what is going on around us, about us, and for us now and for the future. So you find, I Googled what is research, you find a lot of definitions online. One that resonated as research is a structured and systematic process of inquiry aimed at discovering new knowledge, interpreting existing data, and solving specific problems. It involves collecting, analyzing, and documenting information to recognize methodologies to advance understanding within a specific or in a professional field. These are, I call it a formal definition of research. And of course, there are many types of research, whether it's pure, basic research, blue sky, that you just People just dream up. That's dream up things that never was or never is, and then try to find out what it can be. And that's people do research in that mode, but that finds use much later in life. Okay, so you find that many people who won their Nobel Prizes, okay, especially for COVID, you find that the research on mRNA was just what is it called curiosity, but when COVID came, it becomes extremely useful to create the COVID vaccine. So that's research. Innovation. Innovation is these days, it's the English word innovate is for people develop new things. Okay, they innovate novel, but it's now been co-opted to go from taking what is research outcomes, making them useful, okay, and translating them into products that are useful to society, essentially. So that's the value chain of innovation. So it covers from what you get from your research outcomes to development and developing specific products and translating into the market. So it covers entrepreneurship, innovation. So that's a general word now that connects from research what you may call national development. Mm-hmm. And development, the way we have it here is start looking at what does research do for nations? What does innovation do for nations? So we'll try to address that as we go along. Because we find that many countries of late that have developed rapidly, you can look at Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, China. It's the process is research, intensive use of research, and making sure that the research has connection to technological development, to economic development, and social development. All this agglomeration really propels nation forward. We don't have to mention it to anybody. It's obvious. It's obvious to all of us what's been going on over the last 40 to 50 years. Okay, 40 to 50 years. We'll try to discuss this because research, at least on the science end and technology end, it's expensive. Okay, they're expensive. You want to do it at the highest level. It's expensive, but there are things we can do that can add value to society as you go along. So technological development, economic development, social development. You can have all this based on what you do in research. And nations that are able to do this, you can see it move very fast. So for us, since this platform, Professor Falola has put it together to really discuss Africa in depth. Where does research develop and innovation? How does it help us in Africa? How do we use it to propel our continent or individual continent forward to compete with the Community of Nations around the world? Many of us on this panel, we've been everywhere in the world, whether it's Asia, Europe, South America. We see what's going on. Why do we feel we are being left behind in Africa? As I've told my colleagues, I'm an old man. I'm an old man. When I was growing up, at least I grew up in Nigeria. The universities there were world class. Okay, they're world class, bringing people, especially in the health regime, of tropical medicine, local medicine. There were tremendous research labs working on this, but we've lost those momentum from the past. How do we regain them? What should we be doing? How should we train our students? Because research is not only on individual basis. As Professor Falola said, in the university, which is very important. Okay, university has become, over the many years, become a residence for intensive research, especially in the US, which copied from Germany, okay, and really after the Second World War, made strenuous efforts to promote research and development for the society. And many countries of the world have copied this particular model of research in the US. I was in Asia for many years. That's what people copy, essentially the same thing. People are trying to recreate Silicon Valley in their countries. So these are critical elements. How do we bring all these things to really look at Africa and develop? University of Ibadan, University of Lagos, Makerere University, Legon University. These were top-class universities when I was growing up. I applied to many of these universities in those because of those. And how do you use it to bring students? Hopefully, there are some students online today. How do you use it to bring students into the play, to start looking at their own future in terms of looking at affairs of the brain? I call research affairs of the brain. How do you make all these things happen using your intellect? And we don't have to be Einstein to participate, okay? You can participate at any level that you want. So for the students or the young people online, please get involved. Not only if you're in the university, find a professor to work with, find a professor. There are universities, of course, and then there are committed research institutions, whether it's private or governmental. We find that in Asia, the government institutions, research institutions that have contributed significantly to national development. You look at the case of Korea Institute of Science and Technology. They started just helping industry at the lowest level to improve productivity, machine productivity, everything. But now, since the country has moved up, they've moved on the value chain, on really creating research at a world-class level, not just working with technicians or engineers in the industry floor, but really now producing top-notch new knowledge for consumption all over the world. Okay. So, and in terms of development, I've mentioned it, we are interested in development of nations, societal development. How do you take the products of your research, the outcomes, turn into innovation, and deliberately, okay, try to make plans so that what you are developing, and you also produce the workforce that can develop this, and make sure that, because you can have your research within the universities, if you just do it and you don't try to exploit it and train the manpower and provide the knowledge and the funding to make these things happen in your country, it will not happen. Okay, these are deliberate efforts. So please, I don't want to go beyond that. What will happen is that I'll call upon my colleagues to speak for about 5 to 10 minutes each, and then we'll ask questions, and then we'll open it to the audience to ask us questions, and we can discuss this. This is a free-form discussion. This is going to be a free-form discussion. And what we really want is how can we use research and innovation to develop a continent. That is foremost. I don't know too much about the historical, the construction of colonial and everything. In those days, they used to talk about appropriate technology. I don't know what that means. It doesn't mean anything anymore. Appropriate technology doesn't mean anything. Everybody are available. The universities in Nigeria, whether it's in Uganda or South Africa, they can, through collaboration or through working with each other, can participate at the highest level. You can publish if you want. You can turn into applied research that you can use immediately. So those are the things that we should be looking at. It's just the spectrum from pure research to basic to applied research becomes broad sometimes, becomes broad, because for every applied research, there are topics within that you can use for basic research. So those are, so what I'm going to do is I'll call Professor Anumba first, and then for the science and technology sort of infrastructure. I've not talked about infrastructure and all those things. And I'll call on, after that, Dr. Falola, in terms of how does all this happen within the community of humanities, and then Professor Falola, Professor Adefeso is a distinguished biomedical engineer in terms of looking at it in the biomedicine, because that's very, very important as we move on for future and healthcare. And Professor Akinwande, uh, last but not least, in terms of trying to put everything together in terms of national development. He worked at an organization called DARPA, okay, which is a military for use-inspired research. Okay, they actually want to use this stuff. Okay, most of the technology developed for space and all those were developed through DARPA many years ago. So it was there for about 4 or 5 years, helping to create new research areas and fund it at the national level across the country, both across the country and also international collaboration. So we have a distinguished panel here that can really help us understand modern research, innovation, and how they connect to national development. So thank you for joining us today. And first and foremost, let me call on Professor Anumba to get us started. Professor Anumba.
Thank you very much, Professor Adesida, and thank you very much, everyone, for being part of this. I've been asked to talk a little bit about research in science, technology, and engineering. And I think the first thing I'd like to say is that research in these fields is critical for the advancement of humanity. I think if you think about all of the various ways in which society has advanced, with every single one, you can point to these being facilitated in some form by research in science, technology, or engineering. And this actually helps us to improve the quality of life for society, and it starts to address some of the major challenges that we face as a society. When we talk about things like poverty, we start to talk about climate change, healthcare, and other areas. These are all areas that research can help to support and improve. And in terms of approaches to research, there's a whole series of taxonomies that we can use to categorize these approaches. But for the purpose of this panel discussion, I just want to talk about them in the terms that Professor Adesida already mentioned, in terms of basic or blue sky research, and also in terms of applied research. So when you talk about basic research, we're really looking at what some refer to as curiosity-driven research, which does not normally or necessarily need to have an end use in mind when you start out. And then the applied research or the use-inspired research actually tries to solve clearly identified issues, and you do have anticipated outcomes that can be applied to whatever the context you have defined is. And so the actual research methods that you deploy to undertake the research really depends on what the research questions are that you're trying to address. And we find also that hybrid methods tend to facilitate greater insights into many of these research areas. And one thing I always say also is that some of the grand challenges that we have to address as a society actually does require bringing together people from both STEM and non-STEM disciplines. And that's why I'm really happy that we do have representation from the humanities as well on the panel. And so that is often where you have the most interesting and sometimes the most impactful research undertaking. Now, to be able to do research requires an appropriate and stable infrastructure. And that is what a lot of the developing countries do not necessarily have well established. And that is often one of the inhibitors to being able to carry out effective research. And when I talk about research infrastructure, I would like to talk about it at two levels. One is at the national level, and I think, and then the other will be at the institutional level. So at the national level, you really do need strong government commitment, and this can be demonstrated by having a dedicated agency which will be similar to the NSF here in the US, and also there are several other agencies like that. And also you need to provide considerable amount of funding. And in many cases, we are talking about billions of dollars. And then you have to have a variety of programs that will support a diverse range of research types, research partnerships, as well as thematic areas, research areas of national interest. Now, when you then get down to the institutional level, say at the university level, the infrastructure needs to include a well-identified and dedicated unit, which will be most universities here in the US. It's the under the Office of the Vice President for Research, and that unit understands research and also research administration and how to manage all of the necessary inputs and outputs. There needs to be funding for that office that supports the development of proposals, can support seed projects that will then position researchers to go for bigger external grants, and then also bridge funding between projects, because that is critical for research continuity and success. And then, of course, you do have to have dedicated staff that can help to identify research opportunities, help to put teams together, ensure that you conform with the ethical government and funding agency regulations, that are able to liaise with funding agencies and other collaborating organizations, but then also administer and manage the grants themselves. And where appropriate, help the researchers to generate whatever reporting is required in a timely manner. At the university level, I think one area that I'm very passionate about is providing mentoring support for junior colleagues. A lot of people have a PhD and move into academic positions, and we assume that they know all they need to know to be successful at research. But there is a very strong place for mentoring, providing guidance, showing them what a successful proposal looks like, but then also helping them to identify suitable opportunities. And in some institutions, it's also helpful to engage some commercial services to support grant writing, proposal reviews, and a number of other things to support the researchers. And then in terms of funding agencies, you have both public sector and private sector. Public sector funding, typically you will get from government departments, but also research agencies, and I already talked about NSF, NIH, we've had about DARPA, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. In the UK, there's UK Research and Innovation. And in countries like South Africa, you have the National Research Foundation. So these are all funding agencies that will provide funding. You do have quasi-governmental organizations, a number of municipalities that fund local research relating to their specific cities. And then you do have direct government appropriations as well. And these have a variety of requirements in terms of the application process, and then also in terms of its success rate. And some you can get some lots of millions from appropriations without a lot of detailed um, detailed proposals. But then also you do have a number of other organizations that require very, very detailed scientific proposals. And the rules governing all of these funding streams differ from one agency to another. And so the researchers need to understand these and to make sure that their proposals are tailored specifically to each of these agencies. And then another interesting element of funding is the fact, or research, is the fact that you do have to publish the outcomes of the research. In many cases, these are required by public sector funding agencies, whereas the private sector agencies, which are typically from industry, charitable organizations, or professional organizations, do not always require public dissemination, but they will require reporting. And so it's important to understand what the requirements are. And typically when there are stricter dissemination guidelines, these are applicable mostly in situations where proprietary or commercially exploitable results are expected. But overall, you do have publications very important because you do need for people to know what has been done so that others can build on them. And then, and also, those of us in academia, a lot of the criteria for promotion in academia requires that you publish. And so you will hear in many universities the mantra, publish or perish. And I think that's something that researchers are learning how to deal with. Unfortunately, that also has led to some unethical practices, but this is not the forum to get into that. But the reality is that it is important that we disseminate as much as we can. Now, the other element to mention briefly is partnership in research is very highly encouraged. In some areas, you can have three-way partnerships between industry, academia, and the government, and these can be very highly successful. One that I have direct experience of is the engineering doctorate scheme in the United Kingdom, where the government provides a level of funding for researchers that are based in universities and they're co-funded by a company. And so these researchers kind of oscillate between the company and the university, doing research that is directly of interest to the company. And so that is a very successful model that has yielded a lot of patents and a lot of spin-out companies. And then here, one of the things we've done is to kind of emulate that, and a number of other universities do something similar through what we call the embedded researcher model, where you have grad students that are embedded in companies working over a period of time and helping to advance research in a way that allows them access to real-time empirical data from the company's operations while bringing to bear the overall university research infrastructure. And now increasingly also there are numerous tools to facilitate research. Professor Adesida already talked about being able to just go on the internet and search for information. Increasingly, a lot of researchers relying on artificial intelligence to help them out. And there are situations where AI can be immensely useful, but researchers need to be aware of some of the risks associated with over-reliance on AI. I do think the focus needs to be on understanding AI in order to better leverage it in the different facets of research that we do. And institutions do need to provide appropriate guardrails to ensure that AI is used in the most appropriate and ethical manner. And then in terms of looking to the future, I do think that African countries and institutions do need to start with having a well-defined strategy, because if you do not have a well-defined strategy, it's difficult to actually articulate what research you want to do and why, and then also to make sure that whatever research you're supporting actually yields the required benefits and justifies the associated investments. I think I'll pause there if there are any questions or follow-ups at this point.
Thank you very much, Chimay. Yeah, thank you for explicating on the infrastructure funding. I think UNESCO recommends about maybe 1 to 2% of GDP, annual GDP, to be spent on research. Some countries, I don't know, African countries probably spend 0.2% or 0.3% or even lower. Countries like Korea, they spend 3 to 4%. Singapore, which is just an island state, it spends something like 4%. Much like what you said, that countries have to develop strategies. I think Singapore just developed their 5-year strategy, what they call RIE 2030, Research, Innovation, and Enterprise. And the cost just at the governmental level is $28 billion over the 5 years. So we always joke in Singapore that every household has a research budget, okay, because the money is huge for a country of only 6 million people, and 3 million Singaporeans and 3 million foreigners. So the strategy is extremely important for African countries, that we have to know what we want to do, put a process in place, and be laser focused, okay, in terms of implementing them and requiring accountability. When you give money out, you require that things be done. It may not be exactly what you promised that you want to do, that you do, because there are new processes that comes out as you do your research. That's how Nobel Prize discoveries are made. Okay, that suddenly you are doing something and suddenly something happens. Okay, so it's very important. The funding is very important, especially for universities. So industry can provide their own money to do research, okay, which they do. I don't know, but most countries, industry don't understand what research means, okay? Research means to them, you do something and tomorrow morning it's in the product. It doesn't work usually that way. At the university level, most of the research money comes from the government. And if I can give an example, as I mentioned, in Singapore, it's 28 billion over 5 years. NSF in the US is about $7 or $8 billion. I don't know what's going on with the present government. They are changing it. NIH used to be about 39 billion. And then you have a plethora of other organizations that fund research. And not only fund it for the pure research or even applied research, they fund how do you carry your research to innovation level through what they call SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, and through STTR, technology and technology development, essentially, to allow you to go and start a company. So these are all the things that we can copy, okay? China copied all these things to the T. I can assure you, they copied everything, okay? They copied everything. So there's nothing that says we cannot copy all this processing, but make sure that it particularizes it to our conditions in Africa. So with that, I'll go to Professor Falola Chimay has talked about the science and the humanities, which is extremely important. I'm an engineer, but it's very important that engineers also understand what is technology used for, because at the end, it is of the service to human beings and service to society. So, Professor Falola, is.
Thank you very much. I'm crashing into this program. I wasn't originally supposed to contribute, but it's my pleasure. But I want to introduce two people. Shetima, he has the Makato Foundation in Nigeria. He's joined us, and I will appeal to him to make his contribution when we invite the audience, because he has a practical experience awarding grants and managing grants. Unfortunately, we also have joining us the president of ASU, the president himself. So I think he should also make a contribution as to the challenges that African universities are having. I didn't pre-warn them, but I hope they will assist us in terms of seeking practical input. Chris, I will call you later on, please. Let me use the ongoing war in Iran to explain things. That what you are seeing now on both sides is the use of technologies, drones, military hardware. They develop because of what we are talking about, R&D. And precision technologies, they are doing bad things and killing people. So R&D can do that, develop various technologies for you. We clear the mess in the humanities. We clear the mess. Because as this war is ongoing, we are the one who will be talking about emotional damages. I couldn't sleep because they've already damaged 58 major Iranian cultural symbols. In the humanities, we cry about that you do not damage cultural symbols of any country. I've served on UNESCO before, and we've told all countries, do not go near that. If somebody buries his father in a cemetery, which we study in the humanities, you don't go near that, irrespective of the level of anger you may have. So the messes we clear are so many, and I will come to that. The challenges we face, there's a funding issue. And I hope my colleagues on this panel will not be angry at me, that there are funding imbalances. Those of you in science and technology receive more while we're permanently underfunded. The reason, and I've been privileged to serve on grant bodies, major grant bodies, and we keep denying them because the question they pose is, what is the relevance of this research? You in technologies and sciences can quickly demonstrate your relevance. If you are doing a research on diabetes, you don't have to say anything. Everybody knows that diabetes is destroying too many lives. But if I'm writing on the history of the Oyo Empire, and they pose the question, what is the relevance of Oyo Empire to contemporary need? It's a challenge. And then there is the issue of how STEM is rated higher than the humanities. And I tell people, if you say it's difficult for somebody who does history to get a job, it's also difficult for somebody who does chemistry to get a job. The challenges are many. And a debate arose in Nigeria last week in relation to the war because our Nigerian colleagues marvel at the capacity of the Iranians to develop all these technologies. And they began to say, if Nigeria is not developing its physics, how is it going to compete even in other things? And if you are not developing your engineering, how do you compete? We have funding issues. We have not solved our colonial academic structures that Professor Adesida referred to in terms of the limitations it has imposed on us in our intellectual tradition. We have limited publishing platforms. Professor Adesida referred to the older tradition of Makerere and Ghana and Nigeria, which produced opportunities to publish. I give a lot of convocation lectures, and I tell African universities, if you want to escalate your rating, humanities, social sciences will move you faster. Check Ibadan that you mentioned. The Department of Geography became one of the best in the world. The Department of History became one of the best in the world. You can quickly transform the humanities to transform your universities. With low budget, there are some low budget departments. If you turn this into the practical outcome, when Nigeria rebased its economy some years ago and overtook South Africa, now it's number 4 now, it's fallen to become the number 1 economy in Africa. It is made possible by 3 things in association with humanities. The Afrobeats and all those music, lots of money. Nollywood, the 3rd or 2nd largest film industry in the world. Fashion industry, one of the most creative in the world today. And when Tinubu came, he created a new ministry, the Ministry of Creative Cultures, Culture Economy. So to those who think that there's no money there, there's actually money there. If you go on tourism, you are doing humanities, and you are doing a lot of things. We study cultures, languages, memory, identity, social life, and all these are critical. Some people have argued that what my colleagues on this panel do, they're also driven by questions we pose around cultures. And that we're also driving your research, and that we expand meta language as you do your research, we expand the knowledge system. We have to do historical research, we have to do textual analysis, we must do ethics that the speaker referred to in terms of how do you deal with AI without ethics. We also do qualitative research, quantitative research. You cannot do ethnography. A colleague of mine and I, we did a book on refugees, over 700 pages long. And we're also doing internally displaced people. You can't do internally displaced people without a lot of research grants. It's absolutely not possible. So there are also aspects, as in the sciences, that requires a lot of money. And now digital humanities, digital social sciences, infrastructures of library and archives and internet, data infrastructure, data colonialism. We have to do all of those in relation to how we will need funding to do that. It's possible to do institutional funding. My colleagues in Africa, I don't have to annoy, I have to be very careful. Institutional funding has been very difficult to manage in African universities. Some granting agencies are saying they don't want to do institutional funding. There was a time when the governor of Nigerian Central Bank was collecting in the central bank grants that people work for before it transfers to the universities. And there are experiences where those funding agencies got very angry and said, look, they are not coming to certain countries again. If you look at the funding of humanities, you will see Ghana, Uganda, they are the leaders because the universities have set up institutional framework that does not deal in corruption. I ask people to translate grants into local languages. When you do so, it means gifts. That is money you can spend. And you find colleagues, first of all, rushing to buy a Prado, a car, before they even begin that research. And it is the honest truth we should tell ourselves, which Professor Anumba was careful not to mention. We have to provoke him into saying, look, this is not an off topic. We have to develop network and ecosystem. There are now research that one university cannot do. And as people ask questions, one of the questions we must ask, how do we build network and ecosystem of funding? That the University of Ghana and University of Makerere will partner. How do we generate public funding? Now, ASU president is here. Ghana, Nigeria, they call it TED Fund. It is our colleagues who fought for that TED Fund. Tax companies put the money in TED Fund and use that TED Fund to build research and build capacities in all disciplines. If they have stayed committed to that goal that ASU fought for, nobody will be talking about funding issues in Nigerian universities. Indeed, last year, they actually wanted to say that entire TED Fund money should go to the federal government, and we fought that. So there are possibilities that we have to discuss that the government is blocking. And we have to talk about how the African Development Bank, ECOWAS, and African Union, we have to pressure them to be involved in funding research, not just in the sciences and technologies, but in the humanities. I'm very grateful, Professor Adesida, for giving me this opportunity because I wasn't supposed to talk. I'm really, really very grateful and delighted.
Thank you. Wanted to make sure that humanity is well represented here because we're all scientists, and I think having been provost before, I know the issues and the issues that the humanities go through in terms of getting even just $1,000 to do their work, because there's no we don't have extensive network in the US of funding. So you have Mellon Foundation, so people have to rely on private foundation, MacArthur Foundation, Ford Foundation to fund humanities. But in Africa, it's probably, I know there's Codestria, is it Codestria in Senegal and other places that try to get some money to fund, but always humanities fall. We don't think of it. I think the government, they only think of science in terms of development, but not looking at the social development. They only look at the economic development. They should look at social development also. So these are the things that we should mention as we talk to African governments. Not only, you mentioned bringing up humanities in terms of higher ratings. Where I worked before, just the College of Education, if you fund them very well in terms of looking at what is it to develop education for kids, for pre-kids, really looking at it in terms of each society, how things move forward in those areas. Those are areas that are ripe for publication internationally, not just locally,
So
but internationally.
Yes. The former secretary of the Association of Nigerian Universities is also here, Professor Ochefu. Please also invite all these big men to contribute to this conversation. Yes.
Thank you. I'm glad that you know all of them so that we can get them to speak. And one thing I'll mention, as I said, I'm an old man, so I know what came out in Nigeria. After during the Biafran War, there was something called Ogunigwe. It's a rocket. Okay? Those guys were making rockets, but they needed it and they did it. And after the war, there was something called PRODA, which was a research organization in Enugu also. But I don't know, all those things were destroyed. So coming out of the war, if the government had been very serious in terms of bringing out the whole country together and really looking at technological development, we will not be talking about Iran. We'll be talking about Nigeria having all those technologies already. So with that, I'll move to Professor Adefeso, Dean of the College of Engineering at the University of Illinois, Chicago, for contribution. You're muted.
Yes,
Okay,
good afternoon. Well, good morning to some part of the world, afternoon or evening. It's a pleasure for me to be a part of this panel, and it's been wonderful hearing and enjoying the thoughts from my colleagues here in the panel. So I sit in the biomedical engineering space, an area that is very important to human health. We have a lot of basic research that happens in the United States as well as across the globe, focus on basic discovery in terms of how the human body works. And it's the discipline of biomedical engineering that partners with those other disciplines to understand how we can translate those basic discovery to technology that can aid human health. Much of the work that was done with the COVID-19 vaccine had a lot of biomedical engineering technology involved in that. And so that is a space that I believe is very important in the ecosystem of engineering and research. So why should government invest in research? You've sort of heard a little bit from our panelists here and there in terms of the critical importance of investing in research to develop the nation in which that research is being done. Right now, in the area of biomedical research, biomedical engineering, African countries really have ceded the work to Western countries. And that has significant repercussion in terms of the health of the citizens of African nation. And one of the ways that we can push to change that narrative so that Africans are not waiting as second or third hand to receive medicines that have not been developed within the African population. So in many ways are not even well suited to address the unique ailments and needs in African countries. How does that tie to research investment? Well, as of right now, and it's been this way for about 3 decades now, the bulk of technology have their birth or conception, I should say, in academic research. And how did we get to that transition? I think Professor Adesida alluded to that in his opening remarks. Basic research is risky because you never know what you're going to get out of it. It's curiosity driven. It's how we learn about the world around us, nature, human body, etc. So there isn't an inherent profitability in basic research, which makes it at odds with companies that are typically profit driven. And so that really is what began to push this idea of government have to invest in research because they needed to de-risk the process by which we generate knowledge. And so you saw that early on in Germany, you saw that begin to come into US, and you now see nations like Singapore that have been mentioned investing heavily because they recognize that research is how we generate new knowledge that are going to produce the technology and the medicine of tomorrow. Okay, So when we invest in research, we're building the pipeline, and there are a few direct repercussions of that, right? It is for economic development. In biomedical research in the United States, we know that every single dollar that the NIH invests in basic research generates about $2.5 in outcome, meaning those basic research produce knowledge that develops technology or drugs, medication that then leads to formation of companies to translate those. And those then, of course, provide opportunities for employment and wealth. Okay. And so the nation really, it's in itself, it's a profitable investment for a country to put money into research, because those come back in terms of the tax base and the profit and employment that comes out of it. And we know that African countries have the highest population, or will have the highest population of youth in the next decade to come. And African countries need to think about how we're going to create employment and economic opportunities for those young people. Turns out one of the best ways to do that is investing in basic research, because you will generate companies. Those companies will hire those individuals. And in addition to the technology that are generated from that the country has intellectual access to, you also have prosperity, because more of your workforce employed. So that's one piece of that. The other piece is, of course, for workforce development, right? One of the best ways to educate is through research. And in fact, one of the things that happens when you don't have research embedded and incorporated with the university education, you have students that are learning based on knowledge of the past, which is fine because you need that baseline. But part of what research does, it's really bringing in real time discoveries into the classroom. And so this is one of those reasons why African countries need to, again, think about investing in research, and again, investing that at the university level. I know that there was a statement about African countries moving away from wanting to invest in research at universities, but inherently, the best case scenario for national investment is when there is a significant portion of that happening in academic institution, because you have better trained workforce at the end of the day, because students are learning and getting those new knowledge real time. So that's an important component there. Now, the third piece of investing, particularly in biomedical research space, comes from the product. Who has access to the product that are generated by research? I go back to the COVID-19 vaccine as a great example of biomedical engineering contribution to inventing and bringing to market a medicine that was very crucial in how we were able to combat the COVID pandemic that we all experienced globally about 5 or so years ago. What you see is that the countries that did the basic research, that generated the new knowledge, that owns the technology patents, the IP, they then become the front line in having the access to the product generated from those. They, in some ways, control the distribution of those as well, which put many African, the entire continent of Africa at the back burner in terms of getting access. Of course, we were fortunate that we didn't see the rapid transmission and spreading of that pandemic in many of our African nations. And so that we didn't really see a massive negative impact of not getting access to those technology. But the question is what happens in next pandemic, in the next two pandemics, which there will be, right? In the history of humanity, this comes and go. And so really, African nations need to think about how do we really stand up infrastructure within our universities, within our industry to start thinking about biomedical research. I am delighted to see that there are now biomedical engineering programs and degrees offering departments that are coming up in Africa. There is still not nearly enough compared to the other traditional engineering programs. And it's going to be important for the health of African nation for us to be involved in those research. The other reason why this is important, again, because human health is I think all of us will agree, a critical issue. And when we don't have access to basic research in African nation, one of the other things that tends to happen is that diseases that are uniquely impacting African population are ignored, right? So the COVID-19 pandemic affected people throughout the globe. Technology that was developed in other countries eventually can be accessed by African countries and the African people and can have benefit. But you have diseases, a great example being sickle cell disease, that we've known about for close to 100 years now, I would say, and maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit. Yet there isn't biomedical engineering solutions developed against that disease, partly because the research infrastructure for medicine and health and biomedical engineering are outside of African nation. And therefore, the people that are at the helm of this are not going to be sensitized to those diseases that are uniquely or that disproportionately affect people from African nation. So part of this is we have to have those infrastructure in those countries so that they also can lead discovery and development of technology focused on those diseases that are unique to their population. So the government has to think about what are the unique problems that we're missing out on having our population tackled because we're not investing in research. And people often forget that there's connection between human health and economic prosperity. When your population is healthy, you have more people that are out there that are generating wealth for the nation. And so again, this investment is pays dividends in many directions. And so it is very important that we continue to push and encourage investment in research in this way. I should also say that for all of this to work out, we have to ensure that all population are represented and have access and participation. One of the things that engineering still suffers from is the participation of women in research at all levels in academic industry, right? And of course, when you don't have the full weight of your population present, you're leaving again things on the table in terms of how innovation works. I think many of us experience that when you have a particular problem, even when you talk about the humanities and personal thoughts, the way you see that problem, embrace it, changes as soon as you discuss that problem with somebody else. Now imagine discussing that problem with another person. The more eyes that are on a problem, the more creative the solutions that come out of those problems. And so again, that highlights the importance of making sure everyone is at the table when we do start setting up this research infrastructure in our academic institution. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you so much for the opportunity to converse with you all.
Thank you very much, Professor Adefeso. It's, as she said, it's very important to have inclusivity in terms of science, research. What I can say, I spent so many years in Central Asia, okay, on the university. As I mentioned to my colleagues, more than 50% of the students in the engineering school and in science and mathematics are women. So somehow over there, they've been able to socialize the society to make sure that women actually participate. But here in the US and in Africa, the women are not socialized to say, well, math is too difficult, I cannot do it. Well, it's not difficult. It's just a question of perspective and being socialized to be serious about it. So that's very important. And one thing I know, as you mentioned in your talk, doing research on what I call native medicine, or I don't call not or traditional medicine. Okay, believe it or not, China has a big effort. They call it TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. They are putting billions of dollars into looking at their traditional medicine and trying to look at the active components of this medicine and try to patent them before Lilly or all these people go and start getting it. Believe it or not, University of Ife and maybe Legon used to do this because Ife had a tremendous college of pharmacy. Well, I don't know, the Nigerians here where we know what is called Agbo. Okay, they were analyzing all those things and trying to figure out what, I don't know whether they still do that. But what I can say is many other countries, Malaysia, China, especially TCM, when they wanted to work with us on their TCM. So there are opportunities for African universities and government to be serious about how do we look at our local remedies and bring it to the market, international market, not just local, but international market, because we have many things that the world wants, not just the minerals, but the culture, the medicine that awaits the world, that awaits that the world is waiting for. So those are that brings it to the market. And going to the market, I'll talk to now Professor Akinwande to start telling us the issue of market, national development, and how you get all these things done. Thank you. No, you're muted. Okay.
Am I unmuted now?
Oh, you're unmuted, yes.
Oh, it's been fascinating listening to my colleagues, and I'm also looking forward to the questions that will come later on because it's very illuminating to see a lot of different perspectives. Like Professor Adefeso mentioned that, looking at things from multiple points of view. But I want to kind of state a lot of things are really going in direction of multidisciplinary that you look at across the board, meaning that those in engineering collaborate with people in social sciences, especially when you look at artificial intelligence, where you have a lot of data that you're really mining and doing something with it. But I'm going to try to focus a lot more on how do we build support for this research by transitioning, because if you have all the research going on and you don't build the support for it, it usually will go away. And the way you build support is that you want to see the outcome. Whatever you've done, less than 1% will succeed. And that's always the case. But you want some vignettes of success come out over time, and setting up the right institutional processes for that to occur is always a great thing. And we should have, the thing is that tolerance for failure is always a base. If you're doing basic research, if you don't have tolerance for failure, you're not going to actually continue that. So you build that tolerance that some of the things or most of the things you're going to do are going to fail. But sometimes some of the things you do will succeed. The reason we're able to talk today really is because of what happened on the internet. And if you know the original purpose of it, it was not for what we're doing now. It was far from it. It was for command and control of military. That is, they don't want to break the civilian to military command chain during any war. And so they had to do packet switching, distribute information in different channels so that if one is broken, the rest is not broken. But today, we are using distributed packet information systems, and it was not developed for this. But you never know the expected outcome may not be what you get. So doing the basic research is for that much more critical, because what you intended may not be what happens, but the good things that comes out of it is far beyond what you develop it for. And so I think it's that building of that long-term process that allows things to occur. So what are the things that I think are important to get that to occur? I think I buy the whole argument, and actually it's very important. The academic environment is probably the best way to do research. Start with basic research, but also some of the applied research that goes out. And if we want to call that applied research, technology, mission-oriented research, or use-inspired research, in which case you identify a problem that you have and you want to apply that research output to. But what happens after you've shown that it works, or you've demonstrated the idea, you have proof of concept? It's still a far cry to get into the market. And so what are the things? I think the universities particularly can be very good at technology transition or technology licensing office. For example, registration of patents or filing patents, creating institutions that allows you to do that very easily without breaking the bank will make a big difference. And it may be where each university does not set up its own technology transition office, but you do a collective one, either within a region or within a country. But perhaps also this could be the point to discuss the idea of an African patent regime, just like the Europeans did. Europeans have a single patent regime. And in that case, you file patents in one country, it applies to the others. But in this case, it also makes sense. We've set up the African customs common regime now. There's a single customs regime that got passed maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I cannot remember. It came through the Afri-Exim Bank. And if you have that single custom regimes, it allows you to have a single, it makes it easy, more important to do a single patent regime. And then now, if you have intellectual property and you can license it, hopefully it then begs the question, how do you get the money to finance taking it to market? And what I've seen, the tendency that I've often seen from most universities that I've dealt with is that we want to give it to a company, essentially free of charge. And that's, if you get something free of charge, do you value it? I'm not sure about that. But having something where you have some needs and you can provide the right atmosphere to get it out makes a big difference. It reminds me of a case of my mentor who worked on a particular thin film in Nigeria, and he found no place until some US company came in and said, oh, we need it. Do you have the patents? And he started scrambling for that. Then venture angel investing, venture capital, we don't have those structures, but they are developing. I'm happy to kind of see that there are some Africans that are taking that big leap forward and bringing in money from everywhere in the world, not only African money, to actually do technology investment. You know, big value. We are talking about $300 billion US dollars over a 3 or 5 year period to do this. But the question that comes in, what's the expected outcome? Some of them will fail, of course. Do we have the tolerance for failure? And but also a lot of them will succeed. Do the ones that succeed be enough to overcome all the failures? And that's what you expect in venture capital, that you expect that maybe 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20 will succeed. But the 10 that, the 9 that do not succeed will actually only create a pathway for the ones that succeed. And perhaps also the question that we raise is, do we kind of come in from the problem and then dive all the way backwards? We've always been thinking of that forward progression, starting from some blue sky idea and take it forward. But the other way we can come about it is start with the problem, identify the correct, and then walk the way backwards. And if we have to do some basic research in the process, then we go to do it. But you start from the problem itself and take it backwards. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of people will use Siri on iPhone. The genesis of that comes from the fact that people wanted to understand what's going on TV in a conflict zone. And then they walk backwards from that, and they do things as crude as it is, but in the process developed it further and further till we could get. So for me, looking at things, I know there are a lot of things that are not right, but there are a lot of opportunities that I see. Given the fact that I'm able to talk to everybody remotely now, the platform for that is there. Perhaps most important is the problem selection. How do we select the right set of problems that have the most impact? And that's something that requires a little bit of having the nose for what's a good problem. If something is only going to change things by 5%, why do it? Let the companies do it. But if something is going to change things by a factor of 1,000 or 100,000, that's the time you know that is very high risk, but you know that if it works, you pays off. The dividends are huge. So, and then one other pattern that I've seen is the lack of collaboration, even across universities, even in a country like Nigeria. This happened during the COVID era because we were trying to put teams together, because you remember the ventilators was a problem. We could not get them. And we had to come up with ways to get teams to work together so that you could rapidly do ventilator prototypes and people could use local materials. But getting universities to work, and there were some countries that were willing to pay for it. France was willing to pay for it, and now I feel that, but getting universities to work together became a problem. So removing those barriers could be very helpful in getting us ahead. However, there's also the other thing, the positives of it that come is that people were able to come up with ideas that did not require external influence or external, they were using local materials, you know, as simple as, you remember, if you take a bicycle, you have that generator that comes from it. It becomes useful to do some things that you will not have thought of. So I see the positives that could happen because of the opportunity is great. However, we have to show that research leads to good things. The final thought I want to leave, and I don't want to belabor this, is the example of what happens in some countries, and as been talked about. Taiwan is a case in point because I'm most familiar because of its connection to the electronics industry. If we take Foxconn, is the biggest contract manufacturer in the world today. And if you look at when it started maybe in 1973. Little by little, they picked up core capabilities and then moved ahead. TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, That I was close to it in the sense that we did studies on it. And if you looked at how it gradually started, a lot of it came out of the Industrial Technology Research Institute, ITRI. And ITRI was able to incubate companies that came out of that. Thus far, they've done more than 300 companies since 1973. We can talk about KAIST in Korea. Similarly, it was focused on helping small companies to be more productive, but over time they up their game and bring up key technologies. And in the particular case, semiconductor industry, they were able to do a lot there. And today they started in 1966, but again, if you look at all the companies that have relied on them, they are not be as good as Taiwan in terms of seeding new companies, but they've helped the big companies like Samsung and Lucky Star to move ahead and become real giants. And Singapore is a really good story, in my opinion. And that good story is that uh, it was simply that they formed organizations like A-Star to help seed development of capacity, but also to seed companies that later became people who developed, provided employment for the people. And and if you want to look at A-Star, what impact it has had, I was just pulling out something. A study was done how much of the products that are coming out of Singapore were developed in the last 5 years. And you see a whooping 47%, meaning it's based on a lot of R&D that occurred recently that they got out. And I think we're in that position to do it if we choose the right set of problems. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's you mentioned Foxconn in Taiwan. The executive vice president is actually a friend of mine, Sidney Lu. They started in 1970s. Terry Gao is the founder. They started by making electrical switches.
Yeah.
Okay, your electrical switches on your wall. Today, they are giant manufacturers. They make your iPhone. Okay, they make iPhone. All the stuff in iPhone, they make them, they assemble them and sell it to the world. And KIST, the same thing, working and trying to see what is called help engineers or for technicians. That's how Samsung grew up. So all these organizations started from simple things, very simple. Okay, so we can start the same way. And the greatest infrastructure, actually, we've not really mentioned here, is having constant electricity and constant water. Okay,
so blame that on us, the two of us.
Yes. Okay, those are the fundamental issues. If you don't have that, if each industry, each company has to generate its own electricity, your product will never be able to compete. It's impossible. Okay, you cannot compete. So you cannot be the local government to yourself, to the industry, to actually to start. So those are critical elements. And of course, the other one is the workforce, the human being in the loop. Professor Adefeso mentioned it. Professor Anumba mentioned it, that the human being is extremely important. And how do we help students and early career researchers to prosper and actually stay in the field? Okay, Dr. Anumba, can you say something about that? How do we help students, especially students, to get involved in research and stay in the field as time goes on?
Yes, thank you very much. I think one of the main areas is to provide exposure. And we can start with providing exposure even to undergraduates. We do need to have some undergraduate research initiatives, starting with involving them in larger research projects, and they can undertake some tasks while observing some some of the graduate level researchers and professors and postdocs at work. And then as they go through to become graduate students, we do need to have systems in place that support them as a cohort of young researchers, teaching them about research methods, research ethics, and a whole host of research skills, and how to publish. And then, as early career researchers, I think that it's incumbent upon some of the more senior researchers to be very selfless in providing support. If you will only comment on a junior colleague's research proposal without being included as a co-PI. Unless you're included as a co-PI, that is not helpful at all. You need to be able to do that without making any such demands. And so institutions need to identify how to make these possible and create the structures to provide that support. It also requires seed funding. Seed funding is tremendously important because if you're going to the likes of NSF for grants, they want to know that you have done some preliminary work. And so being able to try things out on a small scale and show some results is very important at that level.
Thank you. Dr. Adefeso, do you have more to add to that?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think I concur with what Professor Anumba has stated. I think involving student in research also often suffer from scaling, right? There are more students than there are available labs, and there are even less opportunities in those labs to devote to undergraduate student versus graduate student. So part of what we have to do is think about how do we bring research into the classroom. Many of our engineering curriculum need to change with the current times. This is the time to reevaluate those curriculum and recognize that the current generation of students that we have, they're tinkerers. They've been playing around with AI and gadgets and robotics since elementary level education, right? Yet in the classroom, we constrain them to textbooks and theoretical discussions. And so I think we can actually be creative in how we incorporate research, open-ended questions, and research concept into the curriculum. As an example, I spent, before I started as dean at the University of Illinois, Chicago, I spent 18 years at the University of Michigan in the chemical engineering program there. And one of the first things I did as a faculty member is to think about each of the courses in that chemical engineering curriculum. In what ways can we challenge the classroom to think in a research mode? Right? Break the concept down and actually hand it over to the students and give them a research question, give them a boundary, and allow that process to play out. And it has been very successful actually in engaging students. You tend to keep more of your students, especially the women, engaged when they're able to actually be allowed to think creatively around the curriculum. But importantly, we solve a problem of research skill because our classroom of 100 to 120 students, we can't get all of those individuals into a research lab. But if we bring the research into the classroom, then you get more of those students having the concept of what it takes to have an open problem, to go and search in terms of resources and come up with experimental design concept and testing and measuring. So that would be the additional thing I would add on to that. We really need to open our curriculum to allow more of those research concepts in it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. One thing that I'd like to add also is for graduate students, you have to pay them. Okay, you have to really pay. Whether I know in the sciences, it's easier to get money to pay them. The same thing has to occur in the humanities. You have because when you are doing your PhD or doing postdoc, especially PhD, those 4 or 5 years, your life depends on it. So if you have to go and work from morning till night and come to the lab in the evening or that's a hobby. It's not research. You are doing hobby. So one thing I did when I went to Central Asia was actually to institute that model that you have to pay students to stay in the labs. Essentially, sorry, I tell my students sleep in the lab, to sleep in the lab and work virtually non-stop because that's what you need. Because I always say to do research, when you go to the market, you are thinking about it. When you go to any place, you are thinking about research, new ideas, new methods. It excites you. So, and for the young people, that excitement carries over if they are able to find something to rely on to eat, and they are thinking what I call life of the brain most of the time for that period. And if they can carry that forward and become investigators, okay, all through their life, whether it's in the scientific mode, or humanities, or anywhere, whether it's in the government, because you need all these things to make
Professor
critical
Adesida,
decisions.
on the
Yes,
basis of what you've just said, can
yes.
we recommend that African universities should only admit PhD students that they can fund and pay? Because
Well, that
in the
go ahead.
US, all PhDs are paid for.
Yes.
I tell people, if you apply from Ghana or Nigeria, and the university is telling you they're not funding you, that's a bad program to start with.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That for me, I would recommend that. It's extremely important because when I went to Kazakhstan, they were not paying students. So the students would go and work during the day and come to lab at night. I said, if you want me to improve your university, this is not going to work. So we started paying them. We paid them just like the US students, okay? And you could see within 2 years, the productivity, the just excitement. You go to the lab at night, they're there. They go to the office at night. In education, in humanities, they were there. We paid all of them, okay? So you pay them a living wage, okay? You pay them something that they can rely on.
So
So it's
let
very
me
important.
let me challenge Professor Akinwande and yourself.
Sure.
You had the opportunity to be a vice chancellor. They scouted you to university. I'm very aware of that. And Professor Akinwande was appointed to a ministerial appointment. Why did you decline when you have the capacity to transform that space? Professor Akinwande, why did you decline that appointment from Buhari?
Muted. You are muted. You are muted. Tayo, you are muted. Tayo, you are muted.
It's
Is
not
this
from our
talking?
end.
You are muted.
Technician, please unmute him. It's you who will do it. You. It is not from us. It's from you. We are not hearing you. Okay, Professor Adesida, why did you
Yes.
decline this appointment?
Well, look, what is it called? I'll tell you the truth. Somebody approached me in Nigeria to become president of a university. Okay. I told them that, look, I don't want to come and waste my time. You need money to run a university. It's not a charity case. It's not you don't make money from university. I will tell you what I told them, and I know they have it. I said, put $1 billion to $2 billion as an endowment somewhere in Europe or Switzerland or US, where there are laws governing foundation. And you take the interest, bring it to Nigeria and run the university. Okay? Bring the interest and run the university. But they wouldn't do that. So the problem for me is that at the beginning stage, you cannot just rely on tuition. Tuition doesn't pay everything. You cannot pay very good salaries to professors. In many of the universities in Africa, you teach in one university in the morning, you run to another one in the evening to teach another just to make ends meet. I taught in Nigeria for a while. It's not possible to really be able to do that. And you teach, you do research, you supervise students. That's very difficult. It's more than a full-time job to be a professor. So I told them I couldn't do it if you don't put that money. It's a question of resources.
Thank you, Professor Akinwande. Can you talk now?
Yes, I've been unmuted.
Go ahead.
So what he told me when I tried to unmute is that I'm not allowed to unmute. It has to be done by somebody. So principally, the reason I chose was for family reasons, and I had to make a choice between taking care of family and coming to Nigeria at that point. And I chose to stay in the US to be with the family. That's the real reason.
Thank you. Let me bring in the president of ASU to tell us the challenges and what recommendations should we pass on to the government. President of ASU, please. The technician may not know him. Piwuna, look for Piwuna. Piwuna.
Yes, it's on the screen.
Piwuna.
Chris Piwuna. Can you unmute Chris, please? Can the tech unmute Professor Piwuna?
Piwuna, look for Piwuna.
Oh, yes, it's unmuted now.
I'm here now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for calling me to speak on this very important topic. Listening to our speakers and the intervention by Professor Falola himself got me thinking. Number one, the research environment in Nigeria needs to change fundamentally. And part of the change that I think we desire is to see a connection between policies of the state and what happens with our research. There is a total disconnect now between what the policies are and those of us that should, produce research whose output would meaningfully make the country make progress. There is no connection at all. That's on the one side. On the other side is what I would say our own problems as, say, ASU, for instance. It is largely ideological, where we see all captains of industries as crooks and people who have stolen from government, and that we do not have to deal with them. And I say to myself, if the companies are the major consumers of our research outputs, why won't we talk to them? Why won't we reach out to them? December last year, we signed an agreement with government. And in the agreement, I heard Professor Adesida talking about the percentages that other, developed countries, especially in Asia, countries in Asia, are devoting to research. In our agreement, the one we signed with government in December, 3 months ago, government agreed to make 1% of the GDP available for research. That would, according to economists, translate to about 4 trillion naira on a yearly basis. And then you are faced with another challenge altogether. If we flood the research space with 4 trillion naira in Nigeria today, where would it go to? I mean, let's try to answer it honestly. Will it go into people's pockets? Could it be used for the 2027 elections? Or truly, we're going to use it for research? And so to address that, we need to have a body empowered by law to take care of research. As it is today, we have over 60 research institutions, centers in Nigeria. What are they doing? Nothing, absolutely nothing. And so we need to have a legal backing for a research council that would harmonize and bring all these research institutions, streamline their activities, and get us going. But more than that, I think there are things that we need to do in our universities, may involve what we really want to achieve with research. Is it to innovate or to get promoted to the next rank? As it's often the case now. Do we need to have an institution, a university, or some of these institutions that are truly dedicated to research, and they can be monitored and encouraged by government and the private sector? And when you talk about this private sector, I mean, I talked about the ideological differences between us and maybe, the so-called capitalist, neoliberal people in the society. And I say, what if Dangote now decides that he wants to sponsor 100 PhDs in selected Nigerian universities? And whatever they are doing should improve his refinery or his cement factory or whatever. And so we cannot do this successfully without a handshake to the private sector, a genuine handshake with them. Let them tell us what they want. Let us tell them what we can give and agree on terms on how to achieve these things. This is very important because let's say the Nigerian government cannot even give the 4 trillion naira, which is 1% of the GDP for research. We can get business people that can invest 100 billion, 50 billion, I mean, like that. And that could form the entire pool of what we need for research in the country. And so to me, if we truly want to take this research and innovation very seriously, there should be a genuine commitment by government to connect our research institutes, our universities, with policies of government. There is totally no such connection right now. What we have now are people in government who will need some kind of results for what they want to do. They give it out as consultancy, and it's become a conduit pipe for corruption in our systems. But if genuinely there is a handshake between policies of government and research, then we may be going somewhere. TETFund is doing quite a lot, to be honest. We have criticisms about TETFund, but TETFund is doing a lot to encourage research in our universities. And all of us should commend what TETFund is doing. Professor Falola talked about how Ghana is copying from what we're doing. In terms of research, the fund is not much, the one TED Fund is giving. And we also know that research is not something that if we want results next year before the next executive secretary comes on board, we should, give money. It takes time. Most of this research that will be useful to us are longitudinal. Over time, we get it. So TED Fund is doing a lot, but we need to encourage them, and government needs to hands off TED Fund. What we see now with TED Fund, I'm saying this to all of you who are listening here, especially those of you outside this country. And I say it because Professor Falola, who is here, with us, last year, there was an attempt in trying to reform the tax laws in Nigeria to scrape TED Fund. People like Professor Falola worked behind the scenes to make sure that did not see, the light of the day. And so you have a lot of leverage. You won't believe it, but a lot of them trust you too. They believe you know what you're doing, and you need to show more than a passing interest in what we're doing. I challenge all of us here, especially our key speakers, to look at the agreement that ASU signed with the federal government last year and tell us where you think we can improve. Tell us place areas where you think we overlooked, so that as we go on, we can refine these things, and we would make all of you who are outside this country very proud of what we're able to do. I think Professor Adefeso also talked about how students could be involved. In the University of Jos, where I work, we have what we call campus creators, selected students. We have about 27 of them. They just identify the problems they face in the hostel, the problems that they face in their lecture rooms, and we ask them to find solutions to those problems. And guess what? These students have been able to experimentally demonstrate to us that they can address the issue of waste, solid waste in the hostel in a very environmentally friendly way. A student also produced an app for us to get students to pay for their buses from anywhere, the university bus to their lectures, from anywhere, in a seamless way that will curb corruption. Another student devised an app that if you take a book out of the library without permission, you could be found out. This may be things that those of you living outside this country see every day, and it doesn't mean anything to you. But for us, seeing our students, this, forward thinking and trying to find solutions to their problems is something that we can go. And guess what? The students who tried to produce to us ways of managing waste in the hostels, they needed, I think, 57 million naira or so to, develop what they had produced. We haven't heard anything from anybody, not 57,000 naira. Like, it just dies. And so we involve students. We may be hampered by finances, but there's a lot in this country. And I think that any help that discussants like this can give to our system would be well appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Believe it or not, myself, Dr. Akinwande, and we wrote a proposal to the federal government many years ago about what you're saying. The policy, creating a equivalent of a national research foundation, having the policy to tie all these things together. We submitted it. I was there. We submitted it to the federal government, the science advisor. Nothing At that time, they were trying to create new universities. They don't create new universities yet. Put all this money in one place and start really looking at universities that can develop research, genuine research to address local problems, to fund them. But of course, nothing happened. So that's nothing happened. We talked to them, but nobody believed us or worked with us. I see a hands up, Professor Babafemi Ade. Is it Adejo?
Adejo.
Eh? Okay, sure. Yeah. Oh, Badejo, sorry. Sorry. Professor Babafemi Badejo,
Yes.
please.
Yes, thank you very, very much, Prof. As
Thank you.
usual, I cannot say too much about the contribution that the panel has made, which is fantastic. I am happy that the ASU chairman spoke before me, because twice he mentioned corruption. Interestingly enough, none of the panelists thought that this should be a focus, but you are citing, Professor Adesida, you are citing the wonderful things happening in Singapore, and you are not seeing why they have been able to achieve that. Why they have been able to achieve that, if you can reduce it to just one factor, it is leadership. We have leadership deficit. And because we have leadership deficit, you have the problem of a pandemic that is even worse than COVID-19. And that pandemic is none other than corruption. And it has covered both the private, public, as well as the social sectors of the country, and makes many things impossible. You expect 4% of the GDP to go into research when more than probably 20% of the GDP had been stolen, without anybody thinking that it is an issue, and especially in the current setup that we have, until you start aligning and come up with innovative ways also on how to solve the problem of leadership deficit, as well as corruption that accompanies it. Because if you fix corruption, you fix rule of law, you fix many things. There is an inverse relationship between rule of law and corruption. Now, we focus on that, money will be available to take care of the concern of Professor Eniola-Adefeso in terms of the problem of electricity and water not being there, which Professor Akinwande also mentioned that, I think Adesida, that you cannot do many things if you don't have all those in place. And invariably, we need to start finding ways to build all that into why Africa has remained the way it has, why you no longer have the Makerere, UI, and Legon in terms of the experience of the past. I would yield and not say too much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Badejo.
Professor Akinwande wants to reply to you.
Yeah, reply. Yeah.
Well, there are a few things that I've worked with people in Nigeria looking for external grants, meaning from around the world. The biggest impediment to progress typically is the funds get to the university and it's locked up. The people who are supposed to perform the research do not have access to the funds, and we fall behind. You have all these milestones you're supposed to meet, and it goes out of whack, and they cannot go to the next stage. And typically, the fund sits up in the university itself. It's not that the university did not get the funds. It's just in the process of trying to prevent corruption, but at the same time, maybe corrupting the whole process, we just do not find a way to execute. Execution becomes a huge problem. And if you don't execute, nobody comes back to you because they don't think you can do anything about getting their things. So while I recognize that corruption has been a big thing, but sometimes the processes that are put in place to prevent corruption tend to prevent people from executing. So that happy medium has to be found. That and there's also one thing: most universities that I know of do not have something like office or sponsored projects that allows them to do things. So often you find it going to the boss's office and it just disappears there. And there's nobody that is monitoring to make sure that you meet your goals. And so I think if we don't figure out a way to set up those institutional processes that allow you to execute at the same time, making sure the funds are properly spent, we're just going to be going around in circles. But
Yeah.
I want to add one little thing, Vincent. A gazillion years ago, I was sitting, I went to Taiwan at TSMC, and I went to dinner with a group, and we were having, these were people who were classmates with Professor Adesida at UC Berkeley, and some of them
Welcome.
came, were classmates with me at Stanford. They were the people leading Taiwan's semiconductor. So they were asking me, how come you guys don't go to do the same thing in Nigeria? So I started giving all the excuses. We don't have any electricity. We don't have water. They replied, say, you see that big swimming pool there? You know how much water semiconductors need? That's our storage. So they come up with unconventional ways to solve those problems. So we got to figure out, even if we don't have things perfect,
Yeah.
can we get near perfect and move on?
No,
But if we wait for things to occur, we will not go anywhere.
no, thank you for that. And
Yeah.
I think it's not that corruption is being ignored. I would make a case that many of the countries that we've cited as examples do have level of corruption as well. I think it goes to where the leaders of the country want to invest, right? I think I know growing up in Nigeria, there's always this view that other Western nations are pure, and that's why they function well. That's not true.
That's not
Those level of corruption exist in Western government as well. The difference is that the people in power know that certain investment has to be done, and in fact, in doing so, it allows for them to have their cake and eat it too. They get to benefit their own personal self in ways they want to, but they are keeping the engine that run those nations forward, right? So it is still possible in the condition of African countries if the leaders are still understanding the importance of those investments. As an example, about 7, 8 years ago, Nigerian government decided to create a national fellowship where they were giving funds to Nigerian citizens to go get master's and PhD degrees in the top 50 universities in the world. And it was in existence for a short period of time, but as a Nigerian abroad, I saw the impact of that fellowship in how universities viewed the nation of Nigeria. And in fact, we had some of those students in the PhD program at the University of Michigan, and the Nigerian delegation came to visit the University of Michigan to check on those students. And I understood as a faculty member how important that university took that visit from that country. So that happened at a time when we would all argue that there was still corruption, right? But a focused governmental investment was on track to have an impact in terms of the talent that then was going to come back to Nigeria to help build those infrastructure. So in the same way, with a focused government deciding to invest in research infrastructure and building those infrastructure, yes, you will still have to deal with corruption, but those things can still happen alongside that. And eventually, when people are employed, you saw the example of Kazakhstan, when people are paid to do these things, and they're excited to do this, you tend to begin to move and de-emphasize the impact of corruption in there. I know I speak in a utopian way, that but corruption exists in all of these countries as well.
Thank you. Obi Anoye. Obi,
yeah.
are you still there? Obi Anoye.
With his hands, I don't know.
Obi.
Can he be unmuted if that's the case, if that's the problem? I don't know.
No, it's lower. Obi, please.
Okay. Hello.
Okay. Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Eminent professors. I always like to be in your midst, even though I am light years away from where you people are intellectually. Obi Angonye is my name. My thinking is this. If we think that the government is not doing enough in the area of research and development, research and innovation, and maybe the private sector here is also not tuned in this direction. Can we think of public-private partnership? If we know that it will be commercially viable, I overheard where one of the professors said that maybe in a certain number, some will fail, some will succeed. If we are sure in a way that these ones that will succeed can pay for the cost of embarking on the research, we can engage in public-private partnership. It should be that in a government that is constrained by budgetary provisions that it cannot fund this, if the private sector can come in, let the government provide the enabling environment and possibly advance a little amount. Instead of not having these things available, if we have it to the extent that the private sector will share, government will also share, it will boost the image of the government even. Ordinary people will think that government is doing so much, but at the end, you find that it is the public sector that is doing much of it through public-private partnership. At least there is a legal framework for PPP in Nigeria, but I'm not certain they are paying attention towards research and innovation.
So what will be the profit for the private, if I may ask you, sir? Because they cannot do it as a philanthropy.
Yeah. That's why I said whether they are commercializable, the products can be commercialized. Now, we are not thinking of basic research. We are talking about targeted research. We're talking about applied research that will bring out solutions that can be marketed. That's my thinking.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Many countries do that. That's very possible. In the US or other countries, there's public-private partnership at all times. There's a framework there, the national framework that we promote all these endeavors. That's the major stuff.
Professor Akinwande, please.
Yeah, I just want to add, to that discussion of yes, sometimes they create the framework. It's the execution that often fails. That execution part of it is simply that the best qualified person, or the person most likely going to produce results in terms of the framework. I'm not talking about the individual researchers now. I'm talking about governing bodies, like, whether you are running, whether it's TED Fund or any of those research institutes, do you have a right person with the right set of ideas running things? That is merit-based, choose choice of who determines the agenda. That's often a critical path. They set all kinds of laws, good ideas, but after the first person runs it, by the time it gets to the second person, it's down. And to have that continuity is a problem. How do we select those who run those institutions? And how do we make sure that it is going to deliver on results that you are promised? Often what happens is that somebody is just selected because he has a degree in the area. The person is never interviewed. What do you want to do? What are you going to accomplish for us? What resources do you need? This is how much you have. If we give you this much, what can you accomplish? That back and forth conversation never occurs. I'll stop there.
So I'm not sure whether you are following an initiative from China, which is to say, why don't you award higher degrees based on projects? In other words, the conventional thesis, why don't you get rid of them and now say you will grade projects? Do you think that kind of initiative can work for Africa? Any of you?
I think, yeah, I'm aware of the.
I'm skeptical.
I'm skeptical. I'm aware of that program. I'm skeptical of it. But if you look at what Japan used to do, okay, Japan, the companies will hire somebody, they stay in the company, NEC, Hitachi, they work in their research labs. They work for many years, maybe 20, 25 years, and really work at the top end research locally within there. And then many years later, they put all these papers together and go to university, maybe take one course or two, and use that to get a PhD. Okay, but they can do that. But having just say, okay, you create what's it called, PhD that depends just only on this. I'm a little bit skeptical. Yeah, I'm skeptical.
Professor,
I think some of that occurs in Europe also. You remember those where people just collect their papers together and that becomes the thesis.
Yeah, no, that happens. And I think I did give the example of the engineering doctorate program in the UK.
Yes.
That is a classic example of the three-way partnership that involves the government, private industry, and universities. And the projects that are produced or undertaken typically have to have a clear outcome that can feed into industry. And the notion at the time was that they are not trying to produce PhDs that sit on the shelf, but produce doctorates that actually can transform industry. And so we actually went as far as to change the traditional thesis model so that it's not one large document. It's actually reformulated as a collection of papers and a discourse that ties them together, where each paper represents a significant contribution. And so this was modeling the thesis after some of the Scandinavian universities who have that model. And so you talk about the traditional PhD thesis that's about that thick. Nobody ever reads that stuff. But if you have a highly synthesized collection that addresses fundamental industry problems, then it does have a much better chance of being taken up, especially when the companies are involved in coming up with those solutions.
Thank you, Professor
While I will agree that that's a good one. I remember when we were in Silicon Valley, when we were in Silicon Valley, a lot of the projects were dictated by what goes on from the industry. You know, whether it's Intel, Fairchild, and I can't name all the other ones. But consistent with that is that even though you may produce a thick thesis, there's an intellectual thread that goes through all of them, that you are solving a set of a collection of problems that you can generalize. And the idea is to prepare you, even though you are solving the problems of Intel. I remember, you know, a lot of the projects I dealt in grad school. Before we produce the report, it's all over Silicon Valley. They will take all of them. We could not even have enough reports at the end of the day. But it did not become a thesis because we have to work on something which forms an intellectual thread. And I think it's better for the student to be in that position because they have a platform to go to the next project, meaning develop something totally new and not just servicing a particular industry. The idea is to be able to go beyond what you did as a graduate student. I don't know. That's my thoughts about it.
No,
that's my thought. But let's move.
Okay. Now, I was just going to add very briefly that the beauty of the model was that it wasn't just addressing basic research. It was actually addressing more applied research. So you still have to go through all of the fundamental research processes. And in some cases, companies come up with ideas but do not know how to actually approach them. And so that is where the university and the support actually comes in.
Professor Simon?
We have 3 or 4 hands up, please.
Professor Simon.
Simon, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very well.
I have just a few comments then before I pose. I have a suggestion to make to Professor Pinua also. I'm reading this book right now, The Social Brain, and in fact, 2 works, and seeing social problems. So as you guys were talking, I figured this is very relevant. And no, I am not diminishing anything that has been said. In fact, I love it all. But I am also thinking that maybe it would be very helpful if you guys engage in an interdisciplinary weaving of your comments. Because the humanities is still very much unrepresented, even though Professor Falola tried to intervene. If you think interdisciplinarily, the way my own brain works, is that I can see modes of engagement. That, for example, I have a conversation with my previous dean of engineering, where I asked him, I said, okay, you guys have architects in the architectural program, but what is the relational dynamics of society do you have in mind when you build infrastructures? That is where humanities come in, aesthetics. And if we want to decolonize African educational system, it is only through an interdisciplinary term, no other way. Because the current model is still a colonial model that puts people in silos, and we are not silo creatures. So that I just wanted to say that. But the next thing I wanted to, and again, as I said, respectfully, I'm not diminishing anything you all said. I learned a lot from it. That said, the next point I wanted to say to Pinua, first of all, I think I owe him an apology. Last time he spoke some months ago, I made a comment which might have felt as if I was trivializing the pain of Nigerian intellectuals. When I said I wish people stay talking about funding, salaries at this stage. That's not my intention. But where I'm trying to go with that was that the country is in crisis if we still do not understand we have to pay scholars, academics enough so that they can take care of themselves, because research costs can only occur through leisure. That said, I'm thinking of the following. Why not ASU begin a conversation and also drag all of us in diaspora? We will sign up for this to get the multinational companies in Nigeria like Total, Chevron, even Dangote, and all others. The government should reach an agreement with these companies so that part of the contribution to development of the nation or the region is to create a funding for research.
They already have that. They already
do they have that already?
TED Fund. That's what TED
That's
Fund
what TED Fund is about.
Yeah, the mandatory taxation that they put in TED Fund.
Oh, okay, then good. Thank you for that. Yeah, anyway, so that's what I wanted to say. Thanks again.
So
Yeah.
for
Let
example,
me,
so let me quickly add one little thing.
let Professor Adefeso say something first before you say.
yeah, no, thank
Professor
you.
Adefeso, please.
I wanted to address that comment. I could not agree with you more that one of the blind spots in engineering, which we're working to change, is not engaging humanities in how we think about technology. And there are glaring ways that that ends up killing the technology we design. A great example of this is, again, I go back to sickle cell disease. Not long ago in the US, we celebrated the technology of gene therapy and how that can cure sickle cell disease, and it literally can. And I remember when that news came out I was in a meeting with my students, and I said to them that technology is not going to work in the way they think. And they all looked at me like I was clueless. And I said to them, they have not engaged the population that suffers from this disease. They did not incorporate the social aspect of that disease in the design. Of course, gene therapy necessitates that a patient goes and spend an extended period of time in the clinic to get that very, very difficult process done. Yet the social economics of sickle cell disease in the US, it affects people who tend to have two working families, for example. And so then the social piece in terms of how a person, a young kid, will need to be hospitalized, which means one parent or two have to be out of work, does not make that kind of technology work. And so today we have indeed seen very limited usage of that technology to cure sickle cell disease. So part of what we need to do in engineering is indeed be talking to the folks in humanities as we think about the technology that we're trying to develop. Otherwise, we run the risk of failure, not because the technology can't work, but because people will not uptake it because we've not included them. So again, other example goes around religion, right? How a person of Muslim faith versus a person of Christian faith embraces a solution to a problem can differ. And if we don't understand those things in the way we're designing them, we've already failed. So I appreciate that comment very much.
Well, in
Thank you.
relation to
I think
the point you just made, Brazil passed a law saying that for Jehovah Witness and those who do not want blood transfusion,
blood transfusion, yeah.
they should go and look for an alternative for them. Professor Olakunle,
Yeah.
Olakunle. Unmute Olakunle, please.
Unmuted,
Yeah.
unmuted, yeah.
Good afternoon so much, sir, and
Good
thank you for the
afternoon.
opportunity. I'm just a postdoctoral fellow, sir, at Harvard, not a professor.
Not just a post, you're a postdoctoral fellow, okay?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I want to thank all the speakers that have spoken earlier, the professors. I consider this platform a platform for mentorship for many of us younger ones, in articulating our ideas and how we want to do things. As a person, from time have been very proactive and interested in actually solving real problems. So I wish my research is very translational and it is. And so the question I would have is, how do we create a space for the many brains and intelligent minds that are in Africa to actually move their ideas forward? So what we have, I do metabolomics. And metabolomics is the science of profiling the comprehensive small molecules in all living systems. By that virtue, it establishes the baseline of plants, medicinal plants, humans, animals, and that has very important implications, of course, in agriculture, in healthcare, and other life science areas, pharmaceutical industry, and biotech industry, and all of that. So I mean, over time, over a long time, I've been thinking about it. What is the best way to actually resolve many of these problems that we have in Africa? the issue of corruption, the issue of the lack of electricity, water, all the resources that we need, even infrastructure, even political will to support innovation and all of that. So I founded this Metabolomics Africa, and I'm trying to, have a Pan-African charter with Metabolomics South Africa, where we execute a Pan-African infrastructure, which we call the African Metabolome Database. This African Metabolome Database will curate the metabolomes of all of these, our living systems, and that has a lot of implications in terms of GDP, health, human capital, development and all of that. Currently, with regards to the biodiversity in Nigeria, if we bring it home, this biodiversity is there. You listen to many medical doctors and pharmacists, talk down on our plants, on our herbal medicines, and say they are not standardized. There is no dosage to them, and that's why they don't prescribe them. I mean, it's surprising because, for example, you have a plant in your sitting room, you have a plant in your garden that can cure fibroid, but you don't use it because it is not standardized. So many of us as pharmacists, I'm a pharmacist, I studied pharmacy at IFE, pharmacognosy, medicinal plants. We are not asking the right questions as Africans. So maybe we need a sort of reorientation. Instead of those things that everybody says, these things are not standardized. Why can't we ask, how can we standardize them so that we can use them? This feeds into our GDP. Now, currently, globally, the global market for herbal medicine, it's about $250 billion, almost the same as the total GDP of Nigeria. In the next 9 years, this will increase to $515 billion. European Union had about 44% of that market. Nigeria has almost zero. And we have Aporo Epa-Ijebu. We have all these plants that we use ethnomedicinally to cure many diseases. And we know that many of them are still active. So what the African Metabolome Project is trying to do in this space is to simply acquire the metabolome of these plants, of these herbal medicines, curate that database, and then create an easy pathway, which talks about the interdisciplinary nature of this. Create a pathway to draft policy that will make it easy for herbal medicine practitioners to be able to bring their herbal products to the global market. That is what the European Union has done. I read the policy that registers herbal medicine in the European Union, and that's why they had about 44%. They make it easy for many herbal medicine practitioners to register their products to go on the global market. That's why
So
they have
white people also use herbal medicine?
Say that again, Prof.
Do white people also use herbal medicine?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Because they
Yes.
believe in it. They know that this thing cures. I have my ideological reasons why many people use it. So how do we bring herbs to the market? I looked at the policy, the Nigerian policy that registers herbal products. I shook my head.
There is a professor here. His name is Akin Otiko. He's on this program if he wants to talk. He incubates herbal medicine at the University of Lagos. And they have been marketing them. I hope he can speak to it. I buy herbal medicine from him. And he has dosage. He has instructions. I use his medicine for diabetes.
Interesting.
Please, that word you keep mentioning, what did you call it?
Metabolomics.
Can you define?
Metabolism, essentially. Is
that what you are saying?
Yeah.
Is it metabolism you are saying?
No, sir. Metabolomics. The homics.
What is that? What does it mean?
So
I've never heard the word before. It's new to me.
Yes, sir, Prof. So it's very recent. It's a recent research tool, much more recent relatively to genomics. So genomics is the comprehensive profiling of genes within living system. But we have something called the central dogma of life. And this is why metabolomics is very important.
Metabolomics.
In fact, I say that this African Metabolome Project should be a state of emergency in Africa. Now, we have something called the central dogma of life. And this central dogma of life posits that we have the genes. These genes interact with the environment to produce transcripts. They get expressed to transcripts, RNAs. RNAs get translated to proteins. Proteins work on substrates to produce small molecules. That is, and then you have the phenotype. So you have genes, RNA, proteins, small molecules, and then phenotype. Now, if you study comprehensively the genes, what you're doing is genomics. If you study comprehensively the RNAs, what you're doing is transcriptomics. If you study proteins comprehensively, that's proteomics. If you study small molecules comprehensively, that's metabolomics. Now, this metabolome, these small molecules are the closest to your phenotype. So metabolomics, by definition, is the comprehensive study of the small molecules within living system. And it is the closest to your phenotype. So if you want to understand the phenotype, you study the small molecules. A lot
Please,
of research.
Mr. Olakunle,
Okay.
please send me an email and let's do a special talk on this because it's very significant. Professor
I think
Ogundayo,
Professor Falola, there's a whole field called omics.
Omics.
Genomics, metabolomics, proteomics. These are all studies of, I won't relatively new, but when I say metabolism, there are people studying the genetic factors of metabolic. But let me tell you, I've told you that I'm an old man. I worked for a professor a long time ago called Professor Grillo.
Yes.
Okay, it was it was in Ibadan before I went to Ife to start the medical school.
Yeah.
Okay, he was studying all this stuff. This is a long time ago. So there is what is it called? The basis in Nigeria where people have been doing some of this stuff. But the problem is that it's lost from generation to generation because there are no fundamental policies, as Professor Piwuna was saying. There's no real fundamental platform or network to carry things forward. When a new government shows up, they cancel everything and start from scratch. So there's consistency of policies, consistency of laws, consistency of funding, consistency of leadership is they are all extremely important to make sure that all this is we are talking about here, we are reinventing them. Okay, many of these, we're reinventing them. Okay, as Professor Lakunle was saying, the pharmacognosy, IFE was huge in this area long time ago, taking all the medicine we're using from this stuff and trying to actually take them, making them into tablets. But I don't know what happened to all this. So if there are a new program to be held on that, that would be great. Professor, there are many people trying to ask questions.
Can you see this new book? By Odimosu, Book of Healing.
Okay, Book of
As
Healing.
far back as the colonial period, people were documenting plants and their impact. My series, University of Wisconsin, we just published this book. It's a translation. So we have books on the way and what you can use them for. Professor Ogundayo is left.
No, it's still there. Yeah, it's still there. Professor Ogundayo is there.
Ogundayo.
It needs to be
Ogundayo. No, yeah. I'm glad that this is generating a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
Ogundayo, yes, please. Can Akin Otiko talk while waiting for Ogundayo? Akin Otiko. I just mentioned his name with respect to about medicine. Akin Otiko.
The Chinese call it traditional Chinese medicine.
Akin Otiko. Please talk.
Yep. Yes.
Okay, Prof. Good evening. I'm very delighted to be here.
Thank you.
And I just couldn't resist talking because Prof has mentioned my name. I'm always very excited, super excited. I feel like jumping out of my skin each time I hear conversations around this. There are policies. Nigeria has a policy on traditional medicine. Fafunwa began it in 2007, and it's been reviewed. It's comprehensive. It has an aspect that speaks to how we can make money, how we can use herbs, how it can serve our health system, at least in Nigeria. And it's just the old narrative that we hear all the time, that there is no dosage. I teach traditional medicine in the Institute of African Diaspora Studies at the master's level. We do the theories, and we have a small clinic in the University of Lagos as well. I'm very delighted to say that there's a Rahman Adesida grant that just gave us not so much money, but at least to standardize one of our products, the one we use to help people maintain diabetes. And we're in that process, and by his grace, we're going to be launching that product in August. I'm not doing advertisement, but what I'm saying is that people are doing so much, but the government just chooses not to say a lot. When COVID-19 was there, government officials were coming to traditional practitioners to buy remedies. So it's not lack of knowledge. It's absolutely not lack of knowledge. Maybe it's courage to do the right thing, or maybe, as the narrative is, that some people are making money from WHO and they are not willing to lose the money if they talk about traditional medicine. Even WHO now has a space for traditional medicine. Every 31st of August, Traditional Medicine Day is celebrated. And so the narrative must come from us. The standard of the West, of the global North, is not supposed to be a standard. We should start the conversation. Very often we say grant is what we need to be able to start conversation, but I don't think so. Professor Falola is my mentor. I like to say it anywhere I go to. He's my mentor. And this is a platform where we can begin to talk about it. And I have, in the last less than 2 years, we've had over 1,000 people visit our clinic, and we have on record. Now we're trying to register what we use to maintain diabetes, and they're thinking of the name, and they say, call it Agumu sugar. Agumu is what you pound, and it's for sugar. Why must we call it a big name?
I have it here as we speak.
Yeah, so that's the name we're taking to NAFDAC. Agumu sugar. And when the conversation around it comes, then we begin it. I think we all need to get to that space. I just wanted to respond because Prof mentioned my name. But we have policies. Nigeria has got beautiful policies. What we do not have is the courage to do. If you look at the Nigerian universities, how many universities are doing masters in traditional medicine? In my institute, we only have a course, and I teach that course at the master's level. But I make it big so that whoever is on that course will know that that is what it is. And we also underrate the fact that Lagos State has licensed over 8,000 traditional practitioners, including TBAs, over 8,000. It's on record in Traditional Medicine Board, Lagos. And so there's so much happening. It's just that we still live in the peripheries and we keep the arguments of old going as if nothing is happening. But these people keep us going. In April next month, we're going to be having a conversation around malaria, what we use traditionally to sustain malaria. And that's a conversation for another day. And I can go on and go on. I'm not the speaker, I'm not on the panel tonight, but I get excited when I hear things like this. I just wanted to respond because Prof mentioned my name. Thank you all, and I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much.
I use this medication. I have it in
But
my house. Professor
a question for him. A question for you. Do you are you allowed? I mean, no, not are you allowed? Can you teach this in the medical school at Unilag? Can you teach?
Akinwande, can you integrate this into the School of Medicine?
Oh, okay. I think it needs to be unmuted. Can you? Okay.
Professor Ogundayo, are you still there, or you've changed your mind? Unmuting. It may not be from our head.
Yeah, it's on
mute. It may not be from our head. Please talk.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lola Eniola-Adefeso, for this wonderful panel. I want to say one thing. Let's go back to grassroots. There should be vocational schools instead of having our children leave high school to prepare for JAM to go to university. There should be, it's not everybody that is university material. Somebody used the word tinkerers. Some of our young people are tinkerers. We should revamp the curriculum at the primary and secondary level that includes, that embraces vocational training. And as a result, one of the consequences will be we're going to have a nation of competent professionals who may not necessarily speak good grammar, but are very knowledgeable. That's one. Two, I was reading about Federal Government Girls College in Shagamu and their robotics program. To what extent is any of you panelists involved with that or supporting that? I'm speaking especially to Professor Adefeso. Are you aware of that program at Federal Government Girls College, Shagamu? Thank you.
Can you, Professor Adefeso, can you unmute yourself? No, I think she is not. No. Okay.
Please,
well, look, let me say something to Professor. Okay, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I am aware of that project, and I know colleagues here who are engaged with that project. I think those kinds of activities indeed are important to get people engaged at a younger age, especially young girls, which then hopefully translates them into those discipline at the long run. But what I always say, that the issue of getting girls and women engaged in engineering, science is deep, right? We can get young people engaged, and in the US, we have these types of robotics programs that young girls are engaged with. But then you get into the university setting and you do not see people that look like you, right? There are not many female professors in those technical areas. And so therefore, in the classroom, the young girls and the young women internalize mindsets that they don't belong, and a small little challenge they face, they bleed out. I'll give you a quick example. At the University of Maryland, where I got my undergraduate degree as an engineer, my first engineering class was taught by a female faculty. Why is that important? My first exam didn't go well. I did terribly. And I remember thinking, because I looked in the classroom, I was one of the few women in the class, maybe one of two. And I decided that maybe women shouldn't be engineering, right? But the sole reason why I remain and persist was because my professor was a woman, and that I had the courage to go talk to her. And I said, I don't think I belong in engineering. And she immediately said, that's not true. You do. And because I could see myself in her, I was able to latch onto that. So those programs are great, and they've done a great job in many decades encouraging girls. But those girls, they get into those classrooms, and the visual that they see speaks otherwise. And until we push for more women as professors in those technical fields, we're not going to see those effort at the high school level, at the elementary school level. They're not going to translate into engineering degrees for women.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
I think you better move. Yeah.
Gentleman that was saluting what you were saying he teaches physics and IFA at the University of Ibadan. I hope he will say something. Philip Adeniyi. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I think I will I will start my contributions for this wonderful panel from what Professor Adefeso just said. When I moved to US 2019, I noticed that gap. Therefore, I started a platform called Africa Young Scientists. And in the last 5 years or so, we have trained over 500 young scientists. In fact, last year alone, we got over 800 applications from 32 countries in Africa. Therefore, because I noticed that mentorship is very, very important. And for my area of research, I'm very grateful to hear that Professor Adesida mentioned Professor Grillo, who happened to be the mentor of my mentor, because I was mentored by Professor Cassie Martins. I'm a neuroscientist.
Caxto. I know him.
Casto, yes. I'm a neuroscientist. I work on.
Drank that with him.
Yeah. Therefore, my area of interest is understanding the Alzheimer's disease, and we are doing fantastically well here at University of Oregon, OHSU here in Portland, Oregon. Therefore, I think my suggestion here is, hopefully, if federal government can standardize research program, I support the issue of funding, because research cannot be funded from individual scientists as we do back home. I believe if federal government can establish at least state-of-art university by supporting them, not new one this time around, in all these six geopolitical zone, and create a very fantastic work to do. Could you believe that we don't have a state-of-art research centers in our universities? I remember during my undergraduate day, we always say, "Oh, do you know that Nigeria doesn't have a functioning microscope? Because we have only 3 EM electron microscope, one in UI, one in Ife, I think probably one in Maduguri, and none of them was functioning." Can you imagine? I did my first degree, second degree, we don't have a functioning cryostat to section, which is a very small thing. If an RA come to my lab here now, that's the first thing they need to learn how to use. Therefore, I believe equipment is very, very important, and because that is what we would use to train. It's not about we are talking about the writing the papers, publishing, because that's when the funding comes in. Therefore, we need to help our people to be able to establish, because when we travel out of the country, when we come back, we become useless. The reason why I didn't go back to Nigeria is because there's nothing I will do if I get back. What will I use to function? Where will I get equipment to function? Therefore, the equipment is very, very important. And we should go back to the Chinese model that we suggested. If people were trained here in US, they are encouraged to come back to the country, because if you are able to work here in US for 2-3 years, if you go back, you have been paid highly, and you'll be attached to the industry to help. Therefore, I believe we can do a lot of things. I love the issue of the idea of medicinal research. Before my mentor, Professor Kasmasin, died, that's what we wanted to go into, because we are looking for in fact, my latest interest is now linking diabetics to Alzheimer's disease, because we notice that at the genomics level, the disorder seems to very, very close related to glucose metabolism and iron overload. And that is what our work did about 3 years ago, which goes on national recognition here, because we noticed that iron actually impacts Alzheimer's disease, and our medicinal plants can actually be of a help if we are able to find solution through that level. But what we need to do is equipment, because we can't do all those omics in Nigeria, except fantastic work they are doing at Redeemer University by Professor Happy. I believe this is a very, very good platform. Thank you, sir, for leading this panel. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you very much. It's nice to know somebody who knows.
Sonia, Professor Akinwande wants to reply to Philip.
Well, not to reply, but second him. But I just want to note something, and it makes me kind of go back and forth about what has been and what could be, and those are the two things we're talking about. I was at the University of Ife then, or presently OAU, and the departments was headed by Professor Williams. He had very close contact with Muritala Mohammed. And the signals people from the Army signals were actually trained in the electrical engineering department. The equipment I had at Ife was better than the one I saw at Stanford when I got there. I got to Stanford, January 1980. The equipment I used at Ife to do all my things. So the question I then raised, what happened? How come the equipment were not sustained? And I've had this discussion with Professor Adesida also in terms of semiconductor manufacturing. What that was at Ife at that time. Why many models ahead of the ones that he had seen.
It was better. They were better than what I used in Berkeley for my PhD. I went to Ife after my PhD and I saw them there. They were better than what I used for PhD at Berkeley.
So perhaps the question to answer is what happened in between?
What went wrong? Wahab Aziz, I'm afraid you'll be the last person.
Yeah.
Because I have two questions for the members of the panel before I thank them. Wahab Aziz, have you broken your fast?
Yes, that's why I've just done that, sir. Thank you, sir.
And he did not invite us. He did not invite us.
Well, I'll invite you virtually, please.
Okay. Okay.
So,
sure.
my own just contribute just to appreciate Prof and the speakers, even though I didn't start with the. Please, I want my own suggestion would be to how do we translate all these proposals, all these profound proposals to to action in Nigeria, because if we're able to because we need to work with our colleagues, our senior colleagues in diaspora, to be able to also, I think we have identified all the problems. So how do we, because we cannot do research and innovation without appropriation, grants, and so on and so forth. So maybe we need to do a lot of advocacy to be able to convince our politicians who don't value research in our institutions. They keep on establishing universities and giving them 2,000, what do you call it, 2 billion naira take-off grants. This is unheard of. 2 billion naira as a take-off grant for a new university. That university cannot achieve anything in the next 100 years. Yeah, so please, we need to. Some of us are ready to work with our administrators here so that we can force these politicians to make this country great by investing in our universities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Professor Falola, you said you had a question. Let me answer one question. I think somebody mentioned what is it called? Having different the spectrum of higher education should go from here to there. Long time ago, there used to be technical colleges in Nigeria and trade centers that trained electricians and plumbers and all those things. I don't know whether those ones are still there, but the problem is that we've copied Britain to some extent and turned everything to universities. So you go to Britain, you see Manchester Metropolitan University, it was a polytechnic. You see Liverpool more, it was a polytechnic. So they turned everything to universities, and then they have to go and bring in electricians from Poland. Okay, so they have all these Eastern Europeans now, Poland and plumbers in England, because they upgraded. I mean, they upscaled all the polytechnics and trade centers to universities. So we shouldn't do that. We should have, because not everybody wants to go to university. Well, some people are very good with their hands. So the spectrum of higher education or tertiary education from primary school all the way to university should be widespread so that people will find where they want to go and I know they are trying to turn some polytechnics in Nigeria into universities, and I've been trying to tell them, please don't.
They already did.
They've done it.
They've done it.
And you kind of see it in the curriculum.
Yeah.
That comes out.
Yeah. So I think the important problem here is mindset of the population, right? Polytechnics are being forced to turn to universities because the customer base is everybody wants their children to be in the university and not in technical school.
Correct.
So we have to help change the mindset of the population to understand that trade degrees are not less than. They are an important part of the ecosystem. If we celebrate doctors, lawyers, and engineers, we need to celebrate our electricians because we cannot function. Society cannot function without our plumbers, without electricians. So government and the people and us academics need to join in celebrating those professions. Otherwise, more polytechnic will continue to change to universities because they cannot fill those classrooms because everybody, and we all know the stories. I have many relatives who waited years at home waiting for a university admission when they could go to polytechnic and get trade degree. But the stigma around those degrees is preventing people from wanting to raise their hand for the degree.
Sonny, twice you wanted to talk. Can you talk? You've changed your mind. Please, can you unmute Sonia Ohosi?
Unmute yourself. Yeah.
From United Kingdom. Sonia Ohosi. Please unmute him. Try. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Hello. You can all hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
This is an interesting and very, very exciting debate and discussion today. I just logged in because I was in one of the groups and this one was advertised. So when I saw it, I decided to come on board. And I was going to spend about 5 minutes just to listen. But 5 minutes have now developed into few minutes, few hours, just because what we're discussing here is so fundamental, so very, very interesting. Yes, I'm Dr. Sonia Honzi. I'm based in the UK. I'm a researcher on molecular physiology, which deals with every realm of medical and integration of bringing in allopathy and also issue relating to traditional medicine. I was in India just about 3 weeks ago on a conference that was, 3 months ago, on a conference that was organized by World Health Organization, and it was all about traditional medicine. I think it was Professor Olakunle. I couldn't get hold of you. I couldn't connect with anybody because the host has actually blocked the opportunity for us to make comment and so forth. I'd like to connect with quite a lot of you here because of research base that we were just discussing. Well, my topic at the whole World Health Organization in India 3 months ago was True Healthcare 4.0. And what was that all about? Well, it was all about molecular communication. It's all about molecular adjustment. It's all about medicine that do not interfere with our own system. Every single metabolic dysfunction that we have is as a result of one thing only, cellular dysfunction. And cellular dysfunction is as a result of mitochondrial dysfunction. All of these actually happen, quite a lot of these happen, even up to 80% when the intervention is actually based on allopathic intervention, Western-based medicine. So the issue is this, and I know Professor Lackley spoke earlier, and I'd like to pick him on this so that we can explore opportunities and possibility of working together. And as you all rightly mentioned, okay, I grew up in the UK, but I extracted from part of the African diaspora. My dad is from Ghana. My mom is from Europe, from Ireland. But I have worked quite a lot in Africa, in about 30 different countries. I work at various universities, including Nigeria. Yes, we have talked about corruption, which is quite a major issue. But I think what is fundamentally important, a professional like ourselves, when we organize, we congregate, we create a platform that is formidable, then we can go out in the market to market ourselves without relying initially on the politician. Because let's face it, Africa, everywhere else is a situation of failed leadership. That's the reality of it. Nobody is interested in terms of what's going to benefit the human community. But we as professionals, we know exactly what will benefit. One of the issues I raised at the conference at the World Health Organization when they actually questioned what I developed was this. Why do we have to have a consent as a traditional medicine practitioner, a herbalist? Why does he need to have a consent from a medical doctor who had been mechanistically trained? Why? There shouldn't be any need for that if we have a properly functioning, documented, clinically tried, tested system that can bring everybody together in the same state as a traditional orthodox medicine. Simply because this whole system has not been sanitized. It's not just good enough just to bring any sort of herb and you put them together in concoction and all the rest of them. Then you start administering it, but hasn't been tested, have been testedly trialed. Recently, through my research with other professors in the UK, some of them from Oxford, Cambridge, we then found out that the dysfunctional part of the insulin of the pancreas was not actually caused by sugar or the food that you eat. A totally, completely different. We've been sold a lot of lies by the pharmaceutical industry just to make sure that they are able to sell their metformin and they're able to sell all the other drugs, which are really very anti our own body system. Somebody suffering from diabetes is actually being attacked by a parasite called Uropractic tremon pancreatic. That's a virus. And the moment you're actually feeding this parasite with all the modern medicine, the traditional medicine, orthodox medicine, guess what happens? The actual medication doesn't even get to the root cause of the problem. It's actually feeding the parasite in the process. And the parasite can mutate. And whether you're taking all this thing, you're putting a needle into yourself and all the rest of it, do not even work and does not even create a problem, don't create a solution. This is why I need to submit as my last, that how do we move forward from here in terms of putting an institution in place, engineering, medical, social sciences, humanity, using this particular platform? What strategy do we have here to actually start gathering together the brain, because we have sufficient brain here that is so diverse. It's a spectrum, as I can see from here. How do we bring all of that together, moving from here? Because a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the very first step. And I'm willing and able to commute, to travel to every part of the globe, bringing together, working with all the professionals here to amplify and bring together something that would benefit humanity, not just in Africa, but all over the world. Just to think, why would a president of a country be ill and you fly to another country, trampling on your own medical establishment? What's the justification? Why would the white man respect you when the president of Namibia, the president of Nigeria, the president of Ghana, they're sick and you fly them to Europe? Why? Why would that happen? Why can we not deal with that? How many of the president or prime minister from Europe has ever flown to Africa to go and receive medical management? That's the question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, I was reminded that the secretary of the Committee of Vice Chancellor, that I asked him to talk, and the president of ASU said, look, Professor Yakubu Ochefu, please, you have the final floor now. It's ASU president who reminded me that you are still around. Professor Yakubu Ochefu, former Secretary Committee of Vice Chancellors. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Prof. I think it's been very exciting evening, and I share most of the opinions that have been presented this evening. I always come back to us discussing the fundamentals, which is where are we in terms of the philosophy of higher education in Nigeria in the 21st century? The philosophy, what do we want from higher education for our nation in the 21st century? I say this because there's a lot of disparity out there. The average tertiary institution space has about 22, 23 stakeholders, and all of them are working across purposes most of the time. You have vice chancellors who don't agree with their pro-chancellors. You have pro-chancellors and members of council who don't agree with their vice chancellors. You have 4 different unions that are competing for space. You have professional bodies. You go on and on and on, 22, 23 of them. We don't seem to agree on anything. So we really need to have a very brutally frank conversation about the nature and character of higher education in 21st century Nigeria. I give a lot of talk on education 4.0 and how we need to institutionalize it in our systems. And anytime I give those talks, the feedback, the first quick feedback I get is that, how can I be talking about education 4.0 in an environment 1.0? And the environment and the philosophy of education we're talking about is totally disconnected. And I have said, for me, that becomes an opportunity for us to fix these environmental issues. And we can continue reading from the Book of Lamentations. Nobody's coming to do this for us. We will have to do it ourselves. We have to bring our collective intellect. The super brains that have been on this platform this evening says that much. That is just that formula of how do we aggregate all these resources and convince our political leadership to say, look, these conversations, we need it before this country can make that very critical transition from where we are currently doing things, working at cross purposes. Instead of working on scaffolds, we are working in silos in the 21st century. It doesn't make any sense. You see somebody say because he doesn't have a first degree in mathematics, he cannot go and do a PhD in mathematics and things like that. All those foundational issues that have been busted in other parts of the world, where our people go and come back, we still have issues with them in our polity. So I think if we agree, and Professor Falola, we have discussed this before, that we need to begin to talk to the leadership of the various stakeholders. Let us sit down and say, what do we want for our nation as far as higher education is concerned? The money, the corruption, and all of this we are talking about, we will not resolve them except we're on the same page as far as philosophy of higher education is concerned. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Nice to meet you virtually.
Let me give the panelists your closing statements, if you have one.
Well, let me, Tayo, do you have any?
I think
one or two sentences. One or two sentences.
Let them close. Let them close the way they want.
So it's been very illuminating, and I cannot agree more with the last speaker in terms of what I think has been the structure of academic responsibility, meaning how much responsible is the head of the department is versus how much the dean is versus how much the provost or the vice chancellor, deputy vice chancellor. And without a clear conversation about that, at least my first hand observation is that nothing is going to go forward. So I agree with it.
Adefeso, please.
She's muted.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And again, thank you for the opportunity to join this esteemed panel. I think problems like what we've discussed tends to be, in my mind, a circular problem, right? That there is a pain point at every point in the circle, and at some point one just has to jump in and begin to make solution. Meaning, there is corruption. We cannot wait for corruption to go away before we start to invest in research. But at the same time, we acknowledge the impact of corruption on potential things that can be done to invest. There was a question from one of the audience in terms of how do we get our government of African countries to be sensitized in investment in research infrastructure, et cetera. And it goes back to the people and the grassroots. And it used to be the case that we have a feeling that the people of African countries are powerless. It is not the case anymore, especially with this coming of age of social media. And I've seen the people of African countries, including Nigeria, deploy that to get their government to move on other issues, right? That if we let the people understand that investment in research inherently is an investment in the economy of their nation, and therefore it is inherently an investment in their individual economic prosperity, then the people can be asking their government to invest in ways that can benefit them and their country. And only then can we get medical research, biomedical research, engineering research, social sciences research that can benefit the health and well-being of the members of those countries. I'll stop there. And I guess the one other point I will make is none of this is going to get to where it needs to be when we continue to not encourage half of the population, women, to be engaged. I will point out that 100% of our guests who spoke today were men. Where were the women in the audience? Where is their voice? These are issues that inherently affect men and women. Yet the bulk of the conversation were led by men. So that cannot be ignored in the way African nations will get and be successful in the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you. Professor Anumba, please.
Thank you very much for involving me in this. It's been a real pleasure to be part of this and also to hear a lot of the other contributions. There's certainly the need for action. How that action needs to take place is still up for debate and discussion. But I do believe that if there's a commitment to make a difference, we still have the resources in terms of funds, in terms of manpower, and the will just needs to be there to actually make a difference on the part of the leaders. And I think it has been said that we do have a deficit of leadership. Otherwise, how do you account for Nigerians and other Africans being highly successful everywhere, but not being able to go home and do the same things? If the leadership was there, if the vision was there, we'll all hop on the plane and go back and do what we can to help the country. So I don't know where you take these conversations, Professor Falola, but I do think that there's the opportunity to start to engage the leadership, to start to take steps, even if they are baby steps, towards changing things in our countries.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for participating in this. Hopefully, we can carry it forward. But research, much like in higher education, is for social transformation. Okay? To transform society, to transform the global society, not just only in Africa, but everywhere. So it's very important. Education 4.0, Industry 4.0, these are all just call them titles, but at the base of it is human transformation. How do we transform? I always say that within the university, how do you take raw young minds and turn them into refined and educated young minds? That's the fundamental. And we can extrapolate that to societies. How do you take research and how to take innovation to make sure that your society prospers? Better health, better education, good food, all those things together. I think I've been talking to Tayo. How do we carry all this forward? I'll talk to Professor Falola also, because I think, don't forget, in the United States, there used to be something called robber barons. Okay? There were robber barons, okay? Okay, this way, Stanford, Cornell, they were called robber barons. They were corrupted individuals, but somehow they were able to take that money and use it to capitalize something that 150 years later, we're still, okay, I want to go to Stanford, I want to go to Cornell, I want to go to all these places. So if there's a way to, I don't know whether to make our robber parents in Africa guilty, okay, to do something, not just to build their own universities, but actually contribute money for this PPP, public-private partnership, to actually start funding. Because many universities, many countries have universities, many universities. Many of these universities are glorified high schools, or even worse, okay? They are glorified high schools. But how do we turn the process of education in these countries to actually serve the society? That is the fundamental element. We can talk about research, innovation, but the whole spectrum of education, how do we use it to serve the society? So I think we have to carry that forward. I'll work with my colleagues here and see how we can really move this stuff forward. I went back to Nigeria after my postdoc. The young man there said, I'm just a postdoc. Well, I was just a postdoc at some point a long time ago. But I went back to Nigeria, but I couldn't find something to do because I went to NITEL. I wanted to design microwave system. They told me, we buy it, we don't design it in Nigeria, go away. Okay. So how do we change that conversation to say, we want to produce this thing in Africa, in Nigeria, in Africa? Because when we get students from Nigeria or from elsewhere, really, they come and they perform. Okay, they perform in many of the universities I've been to. I was in Kazakhstan, the Nigerian students, they say, how can we get more of these people? Okay, that's what they were asking me. So we have the manpower, we have the raw elements, which are the people. How do we convert them to useful and productive people to really help our society in general? So that's how we end it up here.
Thank you very much. Let me thank our staff. You can see them.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Jadi and Co.
Let me thank the media. You can see them. They'll be reporting on what you have said. Usually, I won't know the angle that is of interest to them, but they are represented. Let me thank our partners in various countries and their various platforms that have carried this interview. As I said, we only use the Zoom to stream to many other platforms. And our next conversation is on African women who are university presidents to share their experiences. It's been women unique to their administration and the experiences they've had. And we will be announcing the date very shortly. I'm starting an online classes, drawing on all of you to teach for free online to African universities. We record the lectures just as MIT and other universities do, which the students can access anytime they want knowledge. That facility we have not been exploring, how those online classes can reform the African space. I'll be writing my own reports, quoting you and announcing what I think are your biggest statements. As soon as we close, we'll bring music for those who want to stay a little bit more. 2 minutes after this event, the entire transcript is released to the public. And we will give you the transcript which you can share with other people. We are very grateful for your participation. This is a high-powered panel, well published. When I saw Anumba's CV with 162 million grants, I said, why don't you give me that 1 million and I want Trump to the